Hello my spooky people. For this video, it is Lilith part 2, which means I'm going to be making a lot of props and a corset. This cosplay is something that I've been wanting to do for a long time, and I'm really happy with the work that I put into it. I'm also really glad that I took some creative liberties and added a few things and some detail into this very simple, very cartoony design. While I love the show for what it is, and I do love the just base design, I think it has a wonderful silhouette, it is not something that I really wanted to make because it is so simple. I have ADHD and I need things to be interesting. I mean, my walls are chaos. But in order to make it more interesting for me, I needed to add more details, and you've seen me do this in part 1. I added more details in the blouse and a little bit on the skirt, but mostly it's the blouse that I took a lot of liberties with for part 1. But for part 2, I'm taking a lot more liberties with the jewel. It's going to have more flourishes and just more design elements to it. And I'm also adding a corset to her overall look. Lilith doesn't wear a corset, but I'm basing this cosplay off of her season 1 appearances when she's kind of vain and she hasn't really grown much as a character, so I think a corset honestly matches her personality pretty spot on. And then the last thing I'll be making is her Palisman staff, which is like a magic staff thing that has her familiar on it. I'm going to be making those 3 elements throughout this video. Honestly, it should have been broken down into another couple parts maybe, but this is where we're at and it's finally finishing up. So let's start by making the jewel for my Lilith cosplay. Alright, so I'm starting this with the jewel pendant. I'll be sculpting this, molding, and then casting it in UV resin. So first I need to sculpt this in some clay, and already I've run into my first problem. But we'll get to that after I spend way too much time making this first sculpture nice and pretty. Look at how good that looks! My first real sculpture type thing I've made in years, and I'm pretty darn happy with that. I'm using a new molding silicone than what I'm used to, since this is a bit cheaper and I only needed it for a small mold. So without testing, I'm gonna pour the silicone and just hope for the best. I could watch these bubbles popping all day. Okay, it's the next day, and that feels solid. Feels weird. Ugh. Okay. Well, that just came right off. Ooh. Ooh, that's not cured. Everywhere that the clay is touching is very sticky. Okay, maybe I need to let this set up a little bit more. I don't want to like risk that surface. I'm gonna let this set up for another day. Oh, I should have done some tests. Whoops. Alright, well, I guess this is the test. So I hope it goes well. So yeah, I'm gonna let that sit for another 24 hours or something like that. See what happens. So it's a day later. This is still very sticky. It's not at all even cured right in there. I was really hoping it would just cure with a little bit of air exposure, but that's not happening. I don't know what happened or why it did what it did while I'm basically rebuilding this. I'm gonna run a few tests just on the side and make sure it's not reacting with my oil clay. I read the website for this stuff and it didn't really seem like oil clay would be an issue to mold on top of, but it is, and now I have to deal with that, so I'm gonna go deal with that. So it's been a few days. I've had multiple tests fail on me, and I finally got to this one where I've had a tiny smidge of success. So what happened with this is I super measured everything, made sure my ratios were correct with the silicone, and so that cured beautifully. But I wanted to test if it was my clay that was reacting with the silicone, and it turns out it was. You can see there's still some uncured stuff right there on the oil clay itself, and then on the mold it's still kind of shiny in the seam in there. So it didn't cure all the way, which tells me if I tried to use this again, the same thing will happen. So I used polymer clay that I've had forever. I didn't bake it, I didn't bother with that. It actually worked. The mold, the silicone is matte and cured and fine wherever it's touching my polymer clay, so that worked, which means I get to now move on and remake that jewel sculpture, but now in the polymer clay. Okay, so I'm gonna speed through this round of sculpting because it's pretty much the same as before. I'm so happy this one turned out perfectly, and it's one of my best molds I've ever done, if I'm being honest. It just took a lot of cleanup to get the polymer clay out, but I'm really happy with this mold. The way I made this jewel, I'm using some UV resin to make this easier on myself and not have to worry about curing times too much. I'm starting by mixing my blue and my gunmetal colors with some shimmer powders that I got years ago and some alcohol dyes. Next, I will brush the mold with silver shimmer powder, only in the swirls. I used a brush to do this, and I went super slow to make sure I didn't get the silver where I intended to have the blue of the jewel showing. I'm then carefully placing the gunmetal resin in those spots as well. Again, careful to avoid overspill by curing it in sections and using a stylus. Once that's done, I will then fill the rest of the pendant with that blue resin and cure it in very thin layers to make sure it's all set and perfect. Yeah, I had to do this a lot. So it turned out to be a messy process. I think this is my first one, my first attempt. And you can see just how messy and gross and like the silver is just everywhere in that jewel, and it didn't turn out right, so I had to keep going and just keep trying it. And that one I just completely tried to do something different, and yeah, it didn't work. And eventually, this is where I landed. You can see it is a lot less messy with the silver powders, but by the time I did get to this point, the mold was starting to give out, so I've got a little bit of extra cleanup work that I need to do now. Mostly just getting like all of the flashing done, clear all of these little holes on the outside, all of that. And then I also have these. My little teardrops. With these, I'm going to need to clear off the flashing, sand the backs completely flat, and then sandwich two of them together and make a little jewel type thing like that. I'm gonna do all of the cleanup work with a rotary tool and then just quick setting some clear resin on the back to round it and make it nice. And to also sandwich my little teardrops together, I'm just gonna start on the cleanup work now. First, I need to open up the holes and the loops on the outer edge. I'll clear any flashing and as many of these little extra bubbles that happened as I go. I'll also go ahead and get the edges of the drops. Then I'll put a very thin layer of clear resin on top of everything just to give it a little extra shine, and also giving me a chance to fix some of the swirls that didn't take the silver as well. To finish the drops, I will use the mold to help me out a little bit. I'll put 1/2 in the mold and brush a very thin layer of resin onto the flat back. I'll then place another 1/2 on top of that and then cure the resin. Next, I'll open up a few jump rings and glue them to the top of the drops with some resin. Then I will attach the drops to the main jewel with more jump rings. Finally, I am done with the jewel. I think it turned out perfectly and I couldn't be happier with this. So another reason this video took so long to come out is because of some pretty invasive PC issues. Long and painful story short, I'm fighting an OS that doesn't want to play nice with some older parts, and in all of the chaos of getting that mess figured out, I lost some video. Thankfully, all I lost was just me wrapping my dress form to make the pattern for my corset, so once my tape pattern was cut out, I traced it out, added some seam allowance, and I was able to make my first mock-up. mock-up number 1. Honestly, it's not the worst mock-up I've ever done. It definitely needs some work. I am so upset at myself for losing that pattern for my fan-laced corset. Like, that would have been perfect for this. Oh well. So for this mock-up, it's a little bit big. I can basically close this in the back. So everything just needs to get a little bit smaller. I also want to try and make my waist a little bit more dramatic. Something along those lines would be great for this cosplay, I think. I think for this one I'm actually going to dabble in some actual like shaping for this, so that'll be fun. For the first mock-up, I think just overall everything needs to change. It's kind of loose at the very top near my ribs, and also down here this is still pretty loose except right on top of like my side seam right here. So I'm going to mess with the size overall. My 2 side panels I think is where I'm going to do a lot of that shaping, because my front looks good, that's in the right spot, and really nothing's going to change with this seam unless I really want to mess with this, but it's whatever. My back panels, I think I might mess with the back panels just a little bit. For a first mock-up, it's not terrible. I definitely wish I had my pattern from my other fan-laced corset. Oh well. On to adjustments in mock-up number 2. Okay, mock-up number 2. I mean, it's a definite improvement from everything. I'm not nearly as loose up here, so that's a good thing. I'm still a little bit loose around the hips, and I can definitely still push in a little bit there, and I think I can comfortably reduce that a little bit more, so I think I'm gonna work on that a little bit more. Another thing about this corset that I want to do is really make it just really sturdy and really structured. I have a lot of back problems because of my scoliosis, and because I don't really have a specific brace for it, corsetry helps me. I've been wanting a just a blank corset that's really sturdy and strong for me anyway, so for the next mock-up I'm going to add some boning channels on these 2 panels in the middle, and probably even one on the back panel. Another thing I'm not super happy with is the peak shapes. The top and the bottom are kind of, I don't know, it feels a little bit too much for the character. I've drawn a mark already on this one. I'm going to reduce the peak by like that, so it's gonna look more like that line instead of this. And I think I'm even going to do that for the bottom peak. My busk is also a lot smaller than this line is, and I feel like for the cosplay this is too big, so I'm going to reduce the busk area a little bit and play with those lines and just bring that probably more straight right there. I can pretty much close this. Like, if I really tried to, I can close that. And I definitely want this to be fan-laced. So I'm kind of following along to what I did with my other fan-laced corset. I'm going to make sure there's a decent gap in the back so I can put that secondary panel back there and be able to fan lace it. So I've got quite a few adjustments left to do. Let's go on to mock-up number 3. So mock-up number 3. Honestly, I am so happy with this fit right now. I love this hip spring that I've got. I don't usually have that kind of like dramatic waist in my corsets. I don't know why. I think I've just been too scared to do it. This is probably one of my most comfortable corsets to date, even though it is so waist reduced. Up here, I have so much extra room. I can take a full breath. It's not going to affect me in that way because my rib cage is above the dramatic dip. Even down here, when I try and sit down, it's still pretty comfortable because it's still just a little bit over my hip bones. It's not just like digging into me and being uncomfortable. Even taking off the bow, I still have that dramatic waist. That's a pretty straight lacing panel. I don't know. The only thing that I'm really upset about is how crooked this is. Hang on. This is why I do this, because I can't tie a bow behind me to save my life. Okay, So the only thing that I'm really worried about is how crooked my busk is. It really shouldn't be slanted like this. And from a single pinch that I'm feeling in my back, I know why. I have scoliosis. My spine is very S-shaped. That makes things a little bit awkward, and especially a super fitted corset like this. Most of the time I don't really have an issue, but this one I can't get it to, like, I can straighten it out like that. But as soon as I let go and do any kind of moving, it starts moving sideways again. The way I'm gonna have to fix this is I'm actually going to have to designate a left and a right to this and adjust my pattern pieces specifically. To do that, I'm going to need to add room on this side up here, remove a little bit from this side, add a little bit of room here, and remove some down here. So that's going to be a complicated fix, and I'm super dyslexic with left and right, and that's going to be very difficult for me to keep those two sides straight, especially when I have, you know, 3 or more layers to the corset that I'm gonna have to figure out. Alright, so this next round of adjustments is gonna be a little bit more complicated. Let's go. Off camera, I made little marks on my mock-up to tell me exactly what I needed and where, and that helped me keep everything straight. Mock-up number 5. The scoliosis edit that I did worked perfectly. I definitely have a lot more room in this side of my ribs than I do on this one, and that straightened out the bust. So that's great. And it fits really well. The issue that I'm having with it right now is that feels like it's just a little bit too much. I feel like I can make that a little bit smaller. I do know that I'm going to make a privacy panel to help with the fan lacing, so like a bit of a gap is wanted, but I don't know, that feels like it's too much, and I think I can do better. So I'm gonna try for one more mock-up, and hopefully that'll be the last mock-up, and I can get working on the final corset. I'm actually really happy with this so far. Like, this is probably the best, like, shaped corset I've ever done, and it feels really good. There's a lot of room in my rib cage, so I don't feel like I'm restricted in my breathing. All of the reduction happens right under my rib cage, so like everything else just kind of feels like structure and support. It feels great. I'm really liking this corset so far, and I'm kind of excited to get it like really dialed in. So hopefully this next one will be what I need to finish this. So let's get on to mock-up number 5. Mock-up number 5, and yeah, I'm happy with this. My busk is actually straight. Everything fits really well. I can take a full breath and be fine. I like to think that I'm a fairly seasoned corset wearer, but I don't think I've ever had a corset do this to me, and I am shocked at how comfortable this is. I've never had one with like this dramatic of a hip spring, and I am actually amazed that I could probably have gone smaller still, but I don't really want to. I think this is a pretty nice shape, and I don't think it really needs much more. It fits, it looks good. I'm really happy with all of it. So what I'm going to go ahead and do now is cut out and make the final corset. I've got 2 more pattern pieces that I'm going to make for this, that being the privacy panel in the back and the pulls to make it fan laced. I'm very happy with how this is turning out, so let's go make my final corset. So that took a while, but I'm really glad I did do all of that work. This corset won't just be for this cosplay, but another corset that I'll add to my rotation and wear regularly, which is also why I went a little hard on the extra bones. I'll be following close to what I did with my last corset, so if you want to see that in more detail, make sure you check out my fan-laced corset videos. The links are in the description. This corset is going to be made of 3 layers, a stiff back, a canvas type middle for structure, and a black cotton for the outer layer. Once all of those are cut out, I'll start construction by adding extra boning channels down the center of the 2 side panels on both sides, only to the canvas layer. Next, I'm basting the back to the center layers on each panel. This is to make sure nothing moves around, and I'll have smooth panels later. After I baste each panel for the back layers, I will sew up the side seams for both the inner and the outer halves. I'll then press all of those seams open. Please ignore the dog fur. I have a husky mix and he's throwing his winter coat. It's just everywhere right now. Once all of the seams are pressed open, I'll sew boning channels into the seam allowances just for the back halves. Next up, I'll go ahead and make some bones for the channels that I have made. I'll pin the top of the channel and then get my spiral boning out. I'm using some hot glue instead of caps, so as I cut my bones, I'll trim any of the sharp edges I can, and then put just enough hot glue on the tip to cover the rest of the sharp bits, being careful not to add too much, otherwise I'll have issues putting it in the channel later. Normally I would use caps, but honestly I ran out of the right size and I just didn't want to mess with it this time. I saw this hot glue hack, so we'll see how long it lasts. Now I need to connect the outer and the inner layers of the corset. I'm starting that by marking where to sew and where to leave open for the loops on the busk while it's still easy to do so. I'll then pin the inner and the outer layers with right sides facing and then just sew the back panel together for now. I'll then turn those right side out and press it flat. I'll sew some boning channels to the back panel that will be on either side of my grommets later, which strengthens that area against the laces pulling through the fabric. And then with right sides facing again, I will sew the busk seams. Back to my pressing mat, I will flip my corset halves right side out and then press those nice and flat. I'll install my busk next. I'll mark on the outer layer where the posts will be on that half of the corset, poke a hole with my awl, and shove the posts through. Using my zipper foot, I'm sewing as close up against the busk as I can get. I'll also put the loops of the other side of the busk through that half of the corset, through the gaps in the seam that I made earlier, and I'll sew that one in place as well. Next, I'll add bias tape to the top edge of both halves. And once that's done, I can finish making the bones and adjust any of them if I need to. Then I'll seal the bones in by sewing bias tape on the bottom edge of both halves, being extremely careful not to sew on the bones. I'll then close all of that bias tape on the back by hand, and I can now finally remove the basting stitches from the back panel. To finish the corset bodies, I just need to install the grommets. Turns out these tools are sharp. You'd think I'd learned that lesson after years of leather work, but here we are still. Now I need to make the privacy panel on the back and the fan lacing ties. I'll make a quick pattern based off of the corset and then cut it out of the same layers as I did earlier. The privacy panel is built the same way as the corset is. I'll start by adding some boning channels to the canvas layer. Then I will baste the canvas layers to the back layers, both for the ties and the privacy panel. With that done, I'll sew the side seams for the ties and the panel with the back and the front layers, right sides facing. I'll turn those all right side out and press them flat. I'll also go ahead and sew in boning channels on the edge of the privacy panel. Next, I need to hammer on the snaps onto the ties and then make the 4 bones for the privacy panel. Finally, I'll close the panel with bias tape on the top and the bottom edges. I've also sewn in a loose strip down the center of the panel as well to help with lacing. So this is the corset. I kind of hate the fan lacing. It's doing a weird bump situation thing back here. The laces are not actually fanning, they're all just squeezing into this and making this bunch up, and it's just overall not looking super great. I'm going to switch gears. I'm going to take the belt thing off. It didn't work out the way I wanted it to anyway, and I'm just gonna lace this normally. I'm going to attach my privacy panel to one of the back pieces and just have it as a regular privacy panel. Oh well. I did want to have this fan laced because usually it's a pretty easy thing to put a fan lace corset on, but this one is difficult and hard to do, and I still end up needing some help putting it on anyways. It's a good corset, just probably not good for fan lacing. I'm gonna change that and then finally get to work on the staff. So let's go do that. Okay, there we go. Fan laced is no longer. It is now laced regularly, which is kind of unfortunate because that means that lacing panel is now a lot bigger than it really should be, but it's kind of whatever. I might try and make this fan laced again in a different way later on, but I really like this. This is my best fitting corset to date. I love this corset. This fits really, really well on me. I can take a full breath. I've still got so much room up here. Last thing I need to do for this cosplay is make the staff. And then we'll be able to do cosplay shots finally and finish this because it's taken a month and I'm over it. Let's go do that. All right, time for something easier. I have some air dry clay, a pole, hot glue, and some aluminum foil. I'm not the best at sculpting, but sometimes it's just therapeutic to play around with clay, and it has been far too long. Anyway, I've built up the body with a bit of foil and some hot glue until I have a weird egg shape on my pole, and then I'm going to cover it in clay until it kinda looks like my reference pictures. I'll define some lines and then let it sit overnight to dry. Once it is dry, I will take a Dremel and smooth this out as much as I'm able to. I was supposed to spray paint this to make life easier on me, but when I got around to it, it was still way too cold outside and the paint would not have set. So to avoid that headache, I'm just going to use some acrylic paint. The eyes are done the same way as my jewel with the UV resin and shimmer powder. And once again, I should have been wearing gloves for this as well, but I was just so done at this point. Don't be like me. And finally, he is done, and so is this cosplay. I am so happy with how this came out. I am so proud of myself for finishing this cosplay. I love it. I look in the mirror and I think that I actually look like Lilith, and that is not something that I thought would actually happen when I was stuck in mock-up purgatory in part 1. I'm so happy with how this came out. This is so cute. Part 1, I know I was not very happy with how any of it turned out, but to me it reads Lilith, but Lilith for me, and I'm really happy with that. Let's dive into it. What went well, what didn't go so well. I'm only going to talk about the elements that I made in part 2 in this video. If you want to see my thoughts on the blouse and the skirt, make sure to check out part 1. But for this one, we'll start with my gem, my jewel here. I was already getting frustrated with this cosplay when I was doing the gem, which wasn't super great because it's the one that I started with. I went through so many versions and trials of this that I was starting to wonder if I would actually be happy with one. By the time I actually came to this one, I had used the mold so many times that it was starting to grow pits and it wasn't as accurate anymore. I'm happy that this one turned out the way it did because I don't think I was going to be able to get any other runs out of that mold. It turned out well. I think I got some really good detail with it, and I used a lot of techniques that I had never really used before in resin casting, so it was really fun to learn. Right now it's just kind of held onto my shirt with some like double-sided tape. It's working, but I know that if I ever take this out and wear it at like a convention or something, I need to have like a pin or something adhered to the back to actually go through my shirt. It's whatever. It's working for now and it's cute now, so meh. The corset. I am so glad I decided to add a corset to this. I mean, I am definitely one of those cosplayers that I will try and find a way to put a corset into it because corsets give me a lot of back support and just generally make me feel better about myself. But I am so glad with how this corset came out. This is the most custom fit corset I have ever made. You can kind of tell my hip curves are a little bit different per, you know, side, but that's okay. I have scoliosis and you know what happens. I am so happy with how this thing came out. It is so structured. There's so much boning in this thing. It is so solid that I can rest and relax in this thing, and there is still so much room in the rib cage that I can take a whole breath. I was having trouble doing all of those mock-ups and I was so tired of doing all of those mock-ups, but by the end of it I am so glad and so happy with what I came out with. This is my best corset to date. Like, that fan-laced corset was cute. This one is, I feel like, on another level. I am definitely wearing this thing in my daily life. It has been in rotation already and it is just the best corset I have ever made. The one thing that I am a little bit upset about with the corset is I'm kind of sad I wasn't able to do fan lacing, but when I had it set up for fan lacing, I could not get it laced like this. I couldn't get the shapes right. I couldn't pull it tight enough with just that strength. I should probably work out more. It was also adding bulk into my waist, and that's just not something I really wanted with this corset, so I did have to make the ultimate decision and turn it into regular lacing. Overall, I am so happy. I am so happy with this corset. It is something that I'm going to be wearing a lot. And last, my son. He's so cute and he's adorable and very lumpy and very asymmetrical, but that's totally okay. I love this thing so much. It is not at all perfect, and I think that's why I love him so much. By the time I got to the staff, I was done. I was done making this cosplay. So by the time I got to him, I was already of the mindset that if it'll look good on camera from about 5 feet away, it's gonna be good enough for me, and that kind of gave me some freedoms to be messier with it than I think I would have otherwise. I will go ahead and end it there. Overall, I am so happy with how this cosplay turned out. It was definitely a labor of love, and there were many moments where I wanted to give up because nothing was coming out right. There was a lot of trust the process and just hope for the best. But I'm so glad with what I got out of this cosplay. I think I look like Lilith. I think I've represented her well enough. I'm happy with this. I'm so proud of my first cosplay in 10 years. I think right now my biggest complaint is just these little elf ears. They are so uncomfortable and I cannot wait to rip them off. But anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure to check out part 1 if you haven't seen that. If you made it to the end of the video, comment with an owl emoji again. Like this video if you liked it, subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!